Welcome back to another Aftermath edition of the Orange Crush podcast. David Hood alongside myself, Grayson Mann. David, we got a lot to talk about. A lot has happened in Tiger Town this weekend, and outside the college football world, there's just so much going on. We're going to try to cover all that. How we're going to sort of structure this today. We're going to talk about the Citadel briefly, just given the nature it's an FCS opponent. There's not much to break down within this game. We'll talk South Carolina, just between the two of us, what we think, and how the CFP weekend has shaped it to be probably the most significant Palmetto Bowl in the history of this rivalry, just from where we're standing and viewing it. And then we'll address Tae Harris's decommitment. And David, it seems like we have a full plate ahead of Thanksgiving. How are you doing, man? Let's talk your brief thoughts on the Citadel. The Tigers got gashed on the run, but overall they get the job done and put themselves in a good position for next weekend.
Yeah, so the first takeaway is 288 yards rushing by the Citadel. And in case you were wondering, this is the only Power 5 opponent the Citadel played all year. 288 yards was their high, beating the 274 that they had against Western Carolina back on October the 12th. So, that is not good. It just continues, and they average 5.2 yards per rush. It just kind of continues the Clemson's decline in the run game. They did great up at Virginia Tech, but I thought that had as much to do with Virginia Tech's stupid game plan, deciding to not run their running backs and instead run their hurt quarterback as it did anything else. We kind of saw them get gashed a little bit last week against Pitt, even though it was big plays also in the passing game. So that's number one. Like, that has to be fixed. And I can't explain it. I will say this before we get to the offense. You know, you look at it, Dabo Swinney said earlier this week that he fully expected the Citadel to kind of come out and do some option principle, to have some option principles. And guess what the Citadel did? They had option principles, and Clemson's defense never looked like they had practiced it or adjusted to it. You would think at some point you would go to a bare front, a 5-man front, 9-man box, bring an extra linebacker up, something, and instead it just looked like Wes Goodwin played safe, played everybody back, and the Citadel gashed them. And, you know, for South Carolina, you look at that and you're just licking your chops with Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders. Now, on the good side, you know, you said in your keys, kind of getting some offensive consistency. Clemson had 16 big plays. That is a rush of 10 or more yards, a pass of 15 or more. They had a 30-yard pass, a 55-yard pass, a 23, a 16, a 21. And 11 of their rushing plays gained 248 yards. So that's the good news on the offense. And, of course, special teams. They didn't punt, but it continues to be a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think for Clemson, talking to Antonio Williams after this, he said that it was good to get back into a groove that they sort of established in September and October, especially ahead of South Carolina, where all of the stakes are going to culminate. Sweeney talked post game about they weren't exactly prepared. And I don't know if that's a practice thing. I don't know if that's something that I've seen the Citadel for years. That's just their offense, is that option thing. That didn't necessarily strike confidence in what they're doing. But yes, the Citadel rushed for a season high 288 yards against Clemson. And all of Clemson's flaws have been what I think South Carolina's greatest strengths are all year. And we'll certainly get into that preview throughout the week, David. But yeah, offensive rhythm was a plus. Getting gashed on the ground against an FCS opponent isn't exactly what I'd call a perfect day, but nonetheless, they get it done. David, do we just want to get straight into the thing that everybody wants to hear about, is the South Carolina matchup? Let me set the stage for you on what this weekend has done to set up this game. So Ole Miss falls to Florida. BYU falls to Arizona State. Colorado falls to Kansas. Right now, Auburn is slaughtering Texas A&M. They're up 14 heading into the half. Alabama and Oklahoma are squared at 3 apiece. There could be more chaos on the way as we record. I apologize if there's a vacuum going on in the background. I've done my best to mitigate the noise. But David, South Carolina and Clemson, in my eyes, the way that the rankings this keyword should play out, this is going to be a play-in game for an at-large bid, especially if Miami takes care of their business against Syracuse. This is one of the most high-stakes Palmetto Bowls we've seen in a long time, if ever. Just what are your quick thoughts going into this? Sweeney said that in his post game that Shane Beamer has done an excellent job this year. They one of the best defenses in the country, and that Lenore Sellers is a legit product at quarterback. The Tigers are going to have their hands full next weekend at noon. I can't wait, man. This is going to be a very, very fun week.
It's going to be a great week. And, South Carolina, this is probably the best both teams have been, or as equal as they have been since 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. So it's been a decade. And that just makes it fun. It's going to be at high noon. It doesn't give everybody a chance to get liquored up, inebriated. They can eat some breakfast and kind of get in the stadium. I had heard earlier, last week that game day was in play. I think game day would be a great choice to come here, but of course they decided to go the SEC route because why not, and go to Texas A&M. Texas not impressive today against Kentucky. Texas A&M, as you mentioned, getting beat. So game day will head out to Aggie Land for the second time. Texas will be on for the third time. Meanwhile, Clemson and South Carolina may be playing for a playoff spot. And look, for Clemson, for people who are wondering, it's pretty simple now. SMU won today. SMU is in the ACC championship game. The Clemson's path all hinges on what happens between Miami and Syracuse next Saturday afternoon. If Miami wins, they're in the ACC championship. If Syracuse beats Miami, Clemson's in the ACC championship, both to face SMU. That's the way that it sits. Clemson's path to the playoffs could still run through the ACC championship. It could be an at-large berth. We just don't know. Somebody asked me tonight, Clemson fans, what would you rather have? A win over South Carolina, or if you can't have both, or would you rather go to the ACC championship? And I said, with South Carolina being better this year, they're 7-3, 8-3 now. I think Clemson fans might rather have the win over the Gamecocks. I don't know.
I would assume so, given just the state of where things are with both programs, the way that things are ascending in Columbia with Shane Beamer and that group. So sort of put them down another peg would probably be a nice rush of victory for Clemson to get to 10 wins. That would be something that would be major. And I think for Clemson, this is an opportunity to build a resume that isn't particularly strong on their front. Their best win is Pittsburgh, and they were 7-2 going into that game, unranked in the ACC, unranked in the at-large scenario for college football. This is an opportunity to say, hey, we've grown this year. Yes, there have been some bumps in the road, but when it counts, we're playing our best football. The CFP director said himself that wins matter. This would be a pretty big statement win as the rest of the college football world seems to sort of crumble around itself. You got a lot of schools that were considered strong two-loss teams that are falling apart. And meanwhile, here comes Clemson playing their best ball down the stretch. A win against your rival Gamecocks at home could be enough to get yourself into the big dance. Whether Clemson's a contender in that right, we'll answer that question if it comes to it. But right now, an opportunity very much presents itself when a couple weeks ago, David, you and I sat down here to do this podcast, and it appeared those dreams were pretty much dead.
They did seem to be dead. But, but we also said, and I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, you can always expect chaos in November. Stuff happens. And maybe we don't think that SMU is going to lose twice. But Miami hasn't looked good. They haven't played well. If Wake Forest has a quarterback who understands what jersey to throw to, they had a chance to beat Miami today. And now Miami's got to go to the Loud House next week. They got to go to Syracuse, which is a place where good teams go to kind of falter. As I completely go dark once again. Looks like the light just went out. But that's what happens at my house with the ghost. Anyway, so we have the Loud House and Syracuse, Miami. That's going to be fun. Syracuse beats up on UConn today. It's going to be a fun week. I know that much. It's Thanksgiving, recruiting going on for Clemson. Let's segue into that really fast.
Yep.
Clemson recruiting class continues to take hits.
Big hits. Tae Harris, the recent decommitment, it started to float around Thursday evening that he was going to flip to Brent Key and Georgia Tech. And then Friday just became a publicity show for the young defensive back. Tae to Tech became a hashtag that was surfacing. Clemson fans, it wasn't a pretty Friday night if you were a Clemson fan on Twitter. David, I know you have more information on this than I do if you're willing to share, but the overall picture for this is that it's the sixth decommitment for Clemson in this cycle. It's their fourth top 100 decommitment.
Mhm.
We did a podcast on Brock Bradley and sort of what it meant, and it's only gotten worse as Clemson's season has continued to progress. It doesn't seem to be a product on the field, though. It seems to be the nature of the business that is college football that's holding Clemson back.
Yeah, and it's really financial considerations is what's holding Clemson back. And Tae Harris made a trip to Clemson back during the spring. Looked like he was locked in, going to be a Tiger. I would get texts from him all the time wanting, hey, you coming to the game this weekend? Seemed like a Clemson kid, but things happen lately. I understand from somebody kind of down there with him that he was using Colorado, flirting with the Buffaloes. Buffaloes, we know, not afraid to throw some money around to try and get more money out of Clemson, perhaps close to $300,000. Maybe 275 is kind of what I heard from somebody down in his camp. And then Georgia Tech says, hey, come visit us. He goes up there for the win. I think they beat NC State 30-29. He goes up there and, understand, good family, but we're talking about a lot of money. And, if you get $375,000, $400,000 from another school, you're going to flip your commitment. And Clemson not willing to match that for a cornerback. And people, they get angry, they get mad, and you have to understand that there's a cap on what you can do. If you have a third string quarterback, you're not going to pay the $550,000 or whatever it was that Notre Dame paid for, Clemson's former quarterback commit. You're not going to go as high as $400,000 because, for a cornerback who's never played it down, just because you've got to spread all of these NIL resources around. It's not just football. You got to share it with softball and basketball. Chase Hunter, Ian Shefflin had deals to come back. You had the transfers like Chandler Reeves come in. Baseball's trying to use it for scholarships. Lacrosse, man, come on. A lot of money having to be spent. And so these kids are going out. They're going to the highest bidder. And Clemson's struggling. And, it's going to get better. That House resolution is going to pass next spring, extra $28 million, blah, blah, blah. But it is not helping this recruiting class at all. It is struggling. I don't know if you just kind of bite the bullet and try and pay these kids, or if you say, no, we're going to go into the portal. I think at this point, Clemson has to go into the portal. And if that means tampering, then you do it, because that's the way everybody, you got to play the game the way everybody else is playing it.
Yeah, and with the way that athletics has been sort of, as you sort of alluded to, there's a lot of the distribution of the pot has been equally spread out. And I think it's benefited a lot of the other sports where it's been a detriment to football, not being able to take a sizable portion of that and dedicating it to some recruits. And obviously, we know that Sweeney's not going to get a bidding war 400 grand for a corner, like as you said, that hasn't played it down to college football. I think and you can push back on this, it may just be a reflection of where college football is at as a whole. I mean, we just saw Bryce Underwood flip from LSU to Michigan for a pretty sizable total. I know that the number that's been stated has fluctuated depending on who you're talking to, but this also just isn't happening just at Clemson. This is happening a lot of other places. I think just the way Clemson's model, it's going to come into scrutiny, and I think probably fairly so. Where do you sort of see this with the House resolution coming soon? Does it benefit Clemson to say, hey, we finally have some cash to work with here? Or does that just stay put based on where Clemson's style has always been within this new world of college football?
Yeah, I mean, I think Clemson will use that cash. They have to. And but again, it's going to be distributed across all sports, and it's going to help. It's going to help some, and of course, Clemson has to change a little bit of the way that they recruit, and some of it's got to go not only for recruiting but for transfer portal and for retention. And from an article we read the other day, not every school is going to go all in with using the whole entire 28 million. Clemson will, Florida State will, you better believe it. North Carolina probably will. It's going to be a game changer, but again, it's not going to help this recruiting class. This recruiting class has it's suffering, and doesn't look like it's going to get much better, because signing day is very soon as it just continues to flicker here. Looks like I'm in a lightning storm. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm ordering a green screen. I'm going to be able to go to another room soon, I hope. But yeah, man, it just leads towards what we've already said. This is going to be a great week. We've got Thanksgiving coming up. We'll have 2 interview sessions on Tuesday and Wednesday. Talk to Dabo Wednesday night. Thanksgiving is Thursday. And then that big rivalry game, big noon, Saturday afternoon. right now, who you picking?
Right now, I'm leaning towards South Carolina. I think that may be traitorous. I may be a traitor in the Clemson community for doing so, but I think South Carolina's best flaws right now pose a direct opposition to Clemson's greatest weaknesses. And with some of the injury uncertainties, no Woodaz, RJ Mickens, Tate, there's just a lot of questions that I need to see answered this week from Sweeney and co. Before we get into the South Carolina week. David, do you have the Gamecocks as well, or are you rolling with the Tigers on Saturday? And this is very much this is very temporary. This could change over time, but right now I'm leaning South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, you'd kind of have to lean South Carolina because Clemson can't stop the run. If you can't stop the run against the Citadel, what are you going to do against South Carolina? I don't know. But yeah, TBD on a lot of these injuries. Yeah, everybody might have noticed Wade Woodaz, the tight end, he didn't play today. He suited up, but it's a hamstring from what I understand. He should be able to go next week. That's good news. Mickens, hearing good things. Marcus Tate, probably saw him dressed out, but no knee braces or anything like that. He wasn't going to play today. That's probably going to be a later in the week type of decision. So we'll see. If Clemson starts to get a lot of these guys back, then maybe we'll go with the Tigers.
Yep, and we shall see. We also have Eric McLean coming on next week for a South Carolina preview that I know you guys are going to enjoy. He was in the early stages of this podcast. He was a guest, so it'll be nice to have him back. David, should be a absolute thrill of a week. There's a lot going on. I've just checked the ESPN score. Oklahoma's up 7 at halftime. Can't wait to go home and check out that conclusion. Guys, thank you as always for supporting the Orange Crush podcast. You know, it is a noon game this weekend, so why not grab a chicken biscuit from Herb Tyler and Clemson Chick-fil-A as well as their Seneca location. We also want to thank Lisa Nason and Nason Accounting for their sponsorship. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Drop your thoughts on the Citadel and South Carolina as well as your thoughts on the state of Clemson recruiting. Should be a very civil comment section for sure. Thank you guys as always for the support. Drive home safe and take care.